A plan to jumpstart 2023. It's an exciting and energizing day to reset and recharge. Get all the details at livetoleadguam.com. That's live, the number 2, leadguam.com. Live2leadguam.com. Live to Lead is brought to you by Atkins Kroll, the Guam Chamber of Commerce, Guam Contractors Association, the Guam Daily Post, and 93.3 FM, The Point. Get the details and the lowest possible ticket prices right now at livetoleadguam.com. I'm Jerry Roberts, and I approve this message.
Emergency session of the UN Human Rights Council on the unrest in Iran.
Iran called it disgraceful and appalling, but 25 nations backed a plan to set up a fact-finding mission to investigate alleged abuses. 6 countries, including China, opposed the move. The hearing heard how more than 14,000 people have been arrested since protests began in September, over 300 killed, including 40 children. Demonstrators are calling for more freedom and less stringent religious rule. It's after a woman died in the custody of morality police who'd objected to how she dressed. Jonathan Savage, Fox News.
New Twitter owner Elon Musk says he is granting amnesty for suspended accounts that have not broken the law or engaged in gregarious spam. The decision came after a user poll on the social media platform. Musk made a similar move when he restored former President Trump's account last week. A Detroit police officer who killed a 20-year-old black man wielding a knife will not face charges.
Wayne County prosecutor Kim Worthy making the announcement Wednesday. Police officers had fired 38 rounds at Porter Burks during a confrontation on October 2nd. Burks, who had schizophrenia, was believed to have been having a mental health episode when he was shot 19 times. Body camera footage shows police repeatedly pleading with Burks to drop the knife before he charged at them. Burke's aunt, Michelle Wilson, spoke about her family's reaction following the decision.
At this moment, the feeling is devastated. I mean, I can't even describe how I feel.
The family's lawyer announced earlier in the month a wrongful death lawsuit had been filed against the city for $50 million, claiming gross negligence, assault and battery, among other offenses. Laura Cantor, Fox News.
History at the World Cup in Qatar. Cristiano Ronaldo becomes the first male player to score in 5 different World Cup tournaments. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Choice Broadcasting has done it again.
Votes are in and we hit the trifecta.
93.3 The Point, Pika's best radio station. Kyle Mandapat, Pika's best radio personality.
Daryl Lazama, Pika's best DJ.
The stations of Choice Broadcasting say thanks for all your votes and support. Congratulations to all of Pika's best nominees.
If you're an advertiser, find out what our best can do for you and your business.
Call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages, and let us get your message out to Pika's best listeners with Pika's best broadcasters.
Farewell ANZ Bank. You've been an excellent corporate citizen for 30 plus years. And yes, we're competitors, but we're sorry to see you go. Now let us address the bank's customers. Bank Pacific's arms are wide open to accept your banking needs, whether it be to handle your savings, commercial checking, merchant business, or consumer or commercial loan needs. We're open on Saturdays in 4 convenient locations and have excellent online banking services. And we're staying, for as you might know, where others put branches, we place roots. Equal opportunity lender, member FDIC.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. the right of a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You know, that's the way I start the show every day, and you know, it's my signal to everybody out there in our international radio listening audience, which, by the way, today extends all the way from Guam to Qatar. Yeah. It's the way I put people on notice. This is a show that's about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, bearing arms, individual freedom, liberty, conservatism, and related concepts. So if that's what you're interested in, I keep telling you, you are in the right place. And if it ain't what you're interested in, you are really in the right place because you need some learning. Okay, first thing we do here on Tall Tales, first thing I do is Zemi Ikotny. Let's back up a second. I got a Second Amendment item here before we go to Zemi Ikotny. Federal court strikes down another provision of New York's new gun control law. And this is from my buddy Jonathan Turley. I have previously written about how New York has proven time and again as a gift that keeps on giving for the National Rifle Association and gun rights groups. New York Democrats continue to pass laws that are virtually guaranteed to be struck down and further reinforce Second Amendment rights. The latest provision involves the possible criminal prosecution for possessing a gun on private property if the owner has not approved such possession on premises. Yeah. So if I were to go into Payless, I would have to call somebody at Payless first, say, I want to come in and buy a dozen eggs. Is it okay if I come in with my concealed weapon? And I probably ought to record the call, right? Yeah. That was the law that New York passed. New York Democrats have passed a series of laws that led to catastrophic losses in federal court, including the recent major ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. This includes openly gaming litigation to the irritation of individual judges. After each loss, the politicians circle the firing squad again and pass the next round of questionable gun limits. New York Democrat Kathy Hochul promised such legislation within an hour of the release of Bruin. It passed with the help of a special session and the resumption of this inexorable cycle and has already resulted in court losses. Now there's a new such ruling against the law. In Bruin, the Supreme Court rejected New York law under the Second Amendment to publicly carry firearms for self-defense. The court held that New York's proper cause, quote, proper cause licensing regime unconstitutionally infringed this right. New York responded roughly a week later with Senate Bill 51001 in an extraordinary session. The new law created a target-rich environment for new challenges. The new decision comes from Judge John Sinatra, who I understand always wants to do things his way. Yeah, but he has high hopes. Yeah, he's a U.S. District Court judge for the Western District of New York. In a case called Christian versus Negrelli, where the court ruled that private property exclusion violates the Second Amendment. The state might have been able to reinforce an important right of private business owners to exclude guns with a reasonable drafting of the law. It sought to use the issue to effectively ban guns from sensitive and privately owned areas. Governor Hochul again made the case against her own state in ill-considered comments where she proclaimed that 5101 makes no carry the default for private property by establishing that private property owners must expressly allow a person to possess a firearm, rifle, or shotgun on their property. That default is the problem. Here's how the statute reads. Criminal possession of a weapon in a restricted location. A person is guilty of criminal possession of a weapon in a restricted location when such person possesses a firearm, rifle, or shotgun and enters into or remains on private property where such person knows or reasonably should know that the owner or lessee of such property has not permitted such possession by clear and conspicuous signage indicating that carrying firearms, rifles, or shotguns is permitted, or has otherwise given express consent. So the plaintiff in the case, a gentleman named Brett Christian, said, quote, unable to carry firearms in his person throughout the state because of the 5101 designation of private property, even private property open to the public as restricted locations. So Christian brings his firearm with him on private property open to the public, such as weekly visits to gas stations and monthly visits to hardware store. He intended to continue to do so, but the enactment and enforcement of 51001 makes it impossible. Moreover, since 51001 even bars even entering these locations, plaintiff will need to disable and store his firearms before driving his vehicle or walking into parking lots, which means in some instances, plaintiff will need to stop carrying for self-defense before he can get physically close enough to see any clear and conspicuous signage. In other words, you can't get there from here. Not only does this put plaintiff at risk of uncomfortable situations with passers-by observing him disable and store firearms, but the fact he has to constantly disarm greatly reduces his ability to defend himself throughout the state. So you want to pull in and fill up your tank with gas, assuming. Well, I can see why you'd want to carry a concealed firearm, because you may have to rob a bank on the way if you're in New York. So before you can pull into that gas station, you got to stop, get out of your car, take your handgun, your pistol, pull it out of whatever holster you're carrying it in, unload it, disable it, put a trigger lock on it, put it in a case, put it in the trunk of your car, drive in and fill up with gas. In the meantime, every oscillating Richer in town is driving by watching you do this. So, the guy that's out gunning for you says, I'll wait till he goes to the gas station. When he's disarming his firearm, I'll come along and shoot him. Because I don't have to do it. None of this stuff applies to me. I'm a crook.
That's the thing about these types of gun control laws. They don't make any sense whatsoever, and they benefit, like you said, the crook, the person who doesn't follow a law.
Yep. But I suppose it was really good election material for Kathy Hochul, who just barely beat a Democrat. The first time in historical memory that a Democrat has ever come close to beating, a Republican has ever come close to beating a Democrat for governor of New York. The court found a sufficient industry and a substantial likelihood of prevailing on a constitutional violation. In sum, the vast majority of land in New York is privately held, and it encompasses homes, stores, businesses, factories, vacant land, hotels, parking lots and garages, grocery stores, pharmacies, medical offices, hospitals, cemeteries, malls, sports entertainment venues, and so on. These are places that people exercising their rights frequent every day when they move around outside their homes. The exclusion here makes all these places presumptively off limits backed by the threat of prison. The nation's historical traditions have not countenanced such an incursion into the right to keep and bear arms across all varieties of private property spread across the land. The right to self-defense is no less important and no less recognized on private property. Unfortunately, there's no evidence that New York is committed to ending its historical use of a circular firing squad on Second Amendment rights. Hochul used the law to rally support from voters despite this likely outcome. It's all crushingly predictable. Hochul won the election, and yet another provision in law was found unconstitutional. As a result, New Yorkers have once again strengthened Second Amendment precedent in support of gun rights. Yeah, so it had the opposite effect of what the lefties in New York were hoping to provide. Okay, from there, let's go back to Demi Kotny. And it's another, pablum editorial. I got somebody calling in here. Let me just check and see who's in the green room before I plunge into Demi Kotny. And it's R. Keith. Go ahead, R. Keith.
Or for some reason that's not some reason that's not coming through, so I'll just use my regular phone. I chuckle. This couple expressions come up with this as you read the story. One was death by 1,000 cuts. And second was, throw it in the kitchen sink or whatever you got against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
They really are obsessive. That's what I'm looking for about this issue. And I really would love if there are any left-leaning folks in Guam listening right now to call in and explain to us why we have leftist attorneys general, thankfully Guam just got rid of one, who won't actually arrest and punish the violent criminals who have, more often than not, illegal weapons. They let them go. They let them walk the streets. But you are not a law-abiding citizen who goes through all the hoops and regs to get a legal firearm. You're the criminal. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I know what you mean, Orcase. New York has this no bail law. So people that have arguably committed heinous crimes come in and appear before a judge and they're off. And then we have district attorneys in New York and California and other places that if they prosecute a criminal, they reduce the charges. So something like firing a gun and killing someone with it, the charge would probably be disturbing the peace.
Yeah, or jaywalking.
Or jaywalking, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Keith. It just shows you what a mess the left has made of our country and continues to make of our country until we turn the rascals out.
I'm hopeful. For many, many years, the leftists has aimed their guns, pun intended, at the Second Amendment. And the quote right, the conservative and libertarians have fought it on a, we may need them someday in case of an overbearing or abusive government. And now the Democrats don't even want you to defend yourself. They defund the police. They don't prosecute the criminals. And now you can't even defend yourself.
Right.
I'm hopeful that this continued drive sinks into people. That the claims of conservatives and libertarians, quote the right over the years, about the domino effect is happening.
True enough, Arkeith.
Anyway, I would love to hear someone actually explain to me the thinking that goes behind this, because I genuinely do not understand.
Well, either you don't understand or it's too easy to understand. And I'm afraid it's the latter, Arkeith. Thanks a lot for chiming in, as usual.
What I'm finding is, Keith, I think what I'm finding is and there's a level of contempt, and you can see it in some of their writings and some of the way they retort back to people with differing opinions. The contempt is mostly of having a differing opinion, and two, not really understanding the other person you're disagreeing with, so you have to have an ad hominem or really silly law to put into effect that just insults everybody's intelligence.
Yeah.
To me, if they really want to have gun control, then do a good effort at getting rid of the Second Amendment. If not, it's a pipe dream.
Yep. You have a point about the contempt and the arrogance. I actually read an interesting little article today about Martha's Vineyard. And, Martha's Vineyard is the playground of the very, very, very rich and famous. And its crime is apparently limited to, jaywalking, parking tickets, that sort of thing.
Well, and then things like stock fraud and embezzlement, Ponzi schemes.
Lots of white-collar crime.
Yeah.
But apparently, in the past couple months, they've started to see robberies, weapons violations, and things like that. And when you dig into this article, it reveals that the perpetrators doing this are illegal aliens who no doubt have been brought in to maintain the lawns and such things. And I just have to chuckle. So, they feathered their nest, now they're lying in it. So it'll be real interesting to see whether there's I don't know how you would track this, but an increase in gun sales in Martha's Vineyard. Because, as they say, difference between a liberal and a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged.
If I didn't have a job already, you know what I do, Arkeith? I would buy up some handguns, 38 specials and Glock 43s, and then I would take them to a factory that does gold plating, and I would have them gold plated, and then I would take them to Martha's Vineyard and sell them for 10 times more than what I paid for them, and I probably wouldn't be able to keep them in stock.
You are probably right.
Yeah.
Anyway, just wanted to throw my 2 cents in. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Good talking to you, Arkeith. All right, let's pick up with Zemi Cotney then. We talk about the editorials in our 2 papers. Of course, the Post hasn't run an editorial ever since. And for all practical purposes, neither has the Daily News. Today is no exception. Our view: close races in election highlight that every vote counts. All the ballots have been counted. The remaining provisional and absentee ballots have been included, and the close call races for Attorney General and the 15th spot in the legislature have been verified. And with that, just after 2 a.m., November 25, the Election Commission has ratified and certified the results of the 2022 election, officially bringing the election season to a close for this year. The next election season started the next day. There were no changes in the final result. Governor Leon Guerrero will continue her work in her administration's second term. Doug Moylan will take on the responsibilities of leading the island's efforts to reduce crime as our Attorney General. James Moylan will represent Guam in Congress, and Senator-elect Jesse Anderson Lujan will return to the Guam legislature. So here's the future of the Republican Party, Jose. Moylan. Seems to be the most popular name out there amongst them, right? In the nail-biter recount of the Attorney General race, where incumbent candidate Levin in January lost to his opponent by a mere 39 ballots, we are once again reminded of the power of our vote. The civic responsibility to participate in government and ensure our voices and input is heard is never clearer than in days after the election, as the smoke of negative campaigning clears and the dust of active campaigning settles. What, the editorial writer now, they want to quit writing editorials, they want to write poetry?
It was a dark and stormy election day.
Yeah. Once upon a time. And it came to pass.
Call me Ishmael.
It's here in the pages of the Pacific Daily News opinion section, on the floor of the legislature, public hearing room, and through social media platforms and conversations with friends and family, we as a community can come together to discuss the issues we face and plan the best course forward. But it's in the voting booth where our voices are counted. We hope this close call race for Attorney General reminds eligible voters everywhere that voting does matter and that your thoughts and choices can effectuate community change. As we move forward and prepare for the new year of progress and change, we congratulate all of newly elected and returning leaders for the work done during this past election season. You got to be kidding. We encourage all of our leaders, old and new, to take note of the many readers who enthusiastically contribute their ideas and opinions on ways to make Guam stronger. You should have mentioned Tall Tales here somewhere.
I feel like this page has been sanitized.
Yeah, cleaned up a little bit. Okay, then we go to the card. No Public Law 36-34 items today. We start out with the governor versus Therese Tetlahi. And then we've got Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, versus Randy Weingarten. Do you know who Randy Weingarten is, Jose?
I do not.
You're going to find out. We've got Bose versus the electorate, the column that I've been promising for a couple days. And then we've got Wokistan versus history. But, of course, we got to start out with Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. And I think you know how that works. Everybody knows, you know, what red rice is. We see it every time we go to a fiesta, fandango party. It looks like this, and it's obviously orange. But for some reason, we call it red. And when Paul Zerzan wrote to the Daily News and said, hey, guys, let's get with it. It ain't red, it's orange.
I heard in the spirit of Thanksgiving, the colors being the spirit, that everyone had orange rice on their table. It was still made from achote, but it was orange rice.
It was orange rice.
They just didn't know it.
So when, okay. So when Zerzan wrote that, and there was an article in the Lifestyle column that really condemned Zerzan. Leave our red rice alone. So I've used that ever since as an analog to show the difference between the truth and the narrative. The truth is that the rice is orange. The narrative is that it's red. And you better, by God, stick with the narrative if you don't want to get canceled, like Paul Zerzan. So I had a couple of examples of that very phenomenon that came up today. And I'm going to discuss them under systemic racism, although they could possibly fit in the card. The Colorado Springs Massacre. I guess everybody's familiar with that. Well, here's what it's about. Just before midnight on Saturday, a heavily armed gunman walked into Club Q in Colorado Springs and opened fire. He was disarmed and neutralized by patrons, including a heroic Army veteran who described charging through the chaos at the club, tackling the gunman, and beating him bloody with a gunman's own gun. A little poetic justice there. The New York Times reported, but not before he killed 5 people and injured 18 others. Like all mass shootings, it was an act of evil, motivated by a desire to take as many innocent lives as possible. Whether the shooter targeted Club Q because it was an LGBT club is unknown. Indications are, though, that he was a profoundly sick man. In June 2021, he was arrested for allegedly threatening his mother with a homemade bomb, multiple weapons, and ammunition, according to a press release from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. This is El Paso County, Colorado, not the real El Paso. Marty Robbins is El Paso. Out in the West Texas town of El Paso.
Down in El Paso, yeah.
It emerged on Tuesday that the shooter's attorneys also described him as, quote, non-binary. So you and I are binary. We think that there are men and women. If you're not a man, you're a woman. If you're not a woman, you're a man. You are a man or a woman for your entire life. From conception onward, you're one or the other. Some folks would say, no, no, no. People get to decide where they fit in as far as sex and gender is concerned. Some people don't claim either man or woman or anything else. They say, I'm non-binary. In other words, I don't belong to any, I don't play with any of that stuff. He is non-binary, and he prefers they, them pronouns.
This is the shooter.
The shooter.
Okay.
Which tells you already.
This is why the story's been buried.
The story is recast.
Oh, okay.
Recast. This guy doesn't get to be the villain, of course. They, them pronouns? No. Nonetheless, left-wing activists and their allies in the press have been blaming the shooting on conservatives. Club Q was an LGBTQ club where, quote, families of all ages gathered for brunch on Sundays to watch drag performers, the WAPO reported. Just good, wholesome fun on a Sunday.
Family fun.
Good, wholesome family fun. According to the burgeoning conventional wisdom, therefore, the 2 true culprits of the Club Q shooting include libs of TikTok, Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk's Twitter content moderation policies, and the right-wing moral panic. That's the real cause here. The right-wing moral panic about drag queen story hours, and, of course, the entire Republican Party. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attributed the shooting to the right wing's anti-LGBT plus campaign, writing, "Connect the dots" at GOP. Equality Florida Press Secretary Brandon Wolf told PMSNBC that right-wing grifters, including politicians like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, they've been spewing this vile, hateful rhetoric about LGBTQ people, and we warned them that inevitably this would result in violence. This was a New York Times columnist called Michelle Goldberg. Michelle Goldberg argued that the shooting seems hard to separate from the right's nationwide campaign of anti-LGBTQ incitement. Each time these things happens, the right-wing go-to is to blame. Mental illness, Brian Broom wrote in the Washington Post. but it's right-wing rhetoric that sparks these nightmares. There ought to be a law, right?
Again, contempt.
Yeah. It's grotesque to lay blame for this shooting at the feet of millions of Americans who have legitimate questions about children being exposed to drag shows or undergoing irreversible sex change surgeries. The idea that those questions are not just beyond the pale, but are affirmatively responsible for the murder of gay and transgender Americans is a shameless attempt to gain an edge in an ongoing culture war debate. Then I have an article from Red State titled PMSNBC provides, okay, let's take a short break and I'll come back to Red State.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Christmas is a very special time, but it can also be a very hard time. For the foster children Harvest House serves, it can be difficult and painful being away from their families and siblings. During Harvest House's Christmas celebration event, we hope that siblings living in different foster homes can join together to share in Christmas joy. We need your help to provide all 600 plus foster children with Christmas gifts. Help us make this a memorable Christmas for each of them. Harvest House will be accepting gifts until December 14th. Contact us at 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net if you have questions or want a suggested gift list. That's 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Yeah, so picking up with Red State, here's an article in Red State. PMSNBC provides Exhibit A on what happens when inconvenient facts disrupt media narratives. A little systemic racism here, right? So you're going to see the red rice here coming from MSNBC. Unquestionably, the claim by the Colorado Club Q mass shooting suspect's attorneys that the person identifies as non-binary and not a MAGA devotee has sent the usual suspects in the mainstream media into an absolute tailspin. They were hoping that he would be a white Christian male. Some are conveniently pivoting, suggesting that tragedy is still the fault of the supposed anti-LGBTQ rhetoric from right-wingers because of the possibility the suspect may have been motivated by online hate allegedly directed at them. Others seem shocked at the report of the shooter identifying as non-binary so much that they suggested in so many words that it must be a lawyerly ruse designed to get the person off the hook for hate crime charges that are reportedly being filed against him. So if he's a member of the sexual anarchy group, then maybe you can't say it's a hate crime. That's the meaning of this one here. But over at PMSNBC, they're singing a different tune, as evidenced by a Wednesday segment of PMSNBC Reports, in which anchor Lindsay Reiser, who is married to a woman, and her panelists, including the interim deputy legal director for LGBTQ rights at the fraudulent Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a scam if there ever were one. simply ignored the story of how the suspect is said to identify and continued on with the narrative that right-wing hate was behind the senseless murders of 5 people. Here's what Reiser said. Because after the shooting, far-right Colorado Congressman Lauren Boebert, who has previously labeled trans people and drag queens as, quote, groomers, tweeted, "The news out of Colorado Springs is awful. This lawless violence needs to end and end quickly." Pretty responsible. But then fast forward to now, and we have our NBC affiliate in Denver, KUSA, Boebert on a radio show this week vowing to continue her anti-trans rhetoric and rejecting calls from critics to be accountable for her words, saying, "It's absolutely disgusting to try to blame this on me and try to say I have had bad rhetoric about the LGBT community. That's completely false." You'd think after something like this, the rhetoric would cool. But what are you actually seeing? Scott McCloy, SPLC, Southern Poverty Legal Center. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not the case. In the end, you can't spend years and years in midterm elections and all the time demonizing LGBTQ people, working to pass anti-LGBTQ legislation federally and across the states, and then try to inoculate yourself against the charge that you're a part of this problem by simply tweeting, "Oh, this is a tragedy, and it's terrible that it happened." So, you know, they're going to stick with their narrative no matter what the facts are. It's a classic case of systemic racism. What we've seen throughout the last year and even before, and certainly in midterm elections, is a concerted effort by right-wing people like Boebert and other influencers to drum up anti-LGBTQ sentiment and to motivate voters to go to the polls. And these right-wing influencers cannot just skate away and say, "Sorry, not us." I mean, that's why they're called influencers. They're attempting to influence people that listen to them with their rhetoric and words and motivate them to do something. And so they should know that their words and their rhetoric can have consequences. And I think no one should be surprised that when you throw that kind of vile rhetoric out into the world, you can't just expect nothing to happen. McCoy concluded by advocating for the supposed right-wing influencers to be punished for the role they supposedly play in hate crimes when they happen. We need to start thinking about what are the accountability measures that we can take against these right-wing influencers to hold them accountable for their part in what's happened here. So what do you think they have in mind, Jose? Drawing and quartering?
Tar and feather.
Tar and feather. The rack.
The gallows.
The gallows, the guillotine. Yeah.
Scarlet letter C.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or M.
Yeah.
For MAGA.
Yeah. So a classic case of systemic racism played out on the national scene.
Again, this drips with contempt. It doesn't even matter what the line of logic is. It's always about who am I angry at most,
yes,
and who do I just seethe and loathe over, and I'm going to blame them.
It's called grievance politics.
Exactly.
Yeah, the guys over there on the left wake up get a good night's sleep, wake up in the morning, oh, whoa, I feel pretty good this morning. Wait a minute, I got to find something to bitch about.
Or the other mode operandi is to find somebody to create a victim out of.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I suspect that sooner or later, the shooter there at Club Q is going to be lionized. He'll come out as a sort of a reverse George Floyd.
And those victims are just going to be just confused as heck of now how are they, the ones who actually got shot, the ones who actually were killed or injured, are going to say, okay, now we're celebrating the person who shot me because it fits your narrative.
Yeah. Okay, next item on the card, Land Bank Reform Act may have to wait until 2023 senatorial term. All right, let's take a short break and we'll come back to Governor versus Therese.
Choice Broadcasting has done it again.
Votes are in and we hit the trifecta.
93.3 The Point, Pika's best radio station.
Kyle Mandapat, Pika's best radio personality.
Daryl Azama, Pika's best DJ.
The stations of Choice Broadcasting say thanks for all your votes and support.
Congratulations to all of Pika's best nominees.
If you're an advertiser, find out what our best can do for you and your business.
Call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages, and let us get your message out to Pika's best listeners with Pika's best broadcasters.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pika's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Okay, so here we go. Land Bank Reform Act may have to wait until 2023. And there's a picture, it's a front page story, and there's a picture of a sign posted out in the Eagles Field area that reads like this: Return back our land. Original landowners matter. Magahit Tano Itzamoro. And once again, I feel sorry for these poor folks because their false hopes are built in them, not to benefit them, but to benefit politicians. So here's the story. As lawmakers prepare for the final session of the 36th, one bill is unlikely to advance is the Land Bank Reform Act, the governor's remedy for compensation concerns involving what everybody insists on calling ancestral land, which it isn't. Speaker Therese Terlahi, who leads the Legislative Committee on Land, told the Post that the bill proposes no immediate remedy and can be addressed in the next legislative term. Even if it passed today, it's kind of a big so what. So why cram it into the end of this session? And I talked on Wednesday about the fact that it really isn't on the session agenda. In order for it to get on the session agenda, a member will have to move that it be placed on the agenda, and eight members will have to vote in favor of that. Highly unlikely. So back to the story. Governor Leon Guerrero wrote to Terlahi on Tuesday, voicing concerns over the measure having, quote, languished in committee for 5 weeks. Now, this is what we call playing to the nickel seats. I don't know if it's better to call it hot dogging or grandstanding. It's probably both, right? In other words, you know it's not going to work. It's like the guy who's dribbling the ball down the floor and just to show off delivers behind his back before he passes. And the crowd loves it. But it doesn't score any points. It just risks a turnover is what it does. So that's what the governor's doing here. She's playing to the nickel seats. Going on. The governor said, I had requested in my transmittal of the bill on October 18 and again on October 24 that you promptly schedule a public hearing. Yeah, no, 18 and 20. When was the election again, Jose?
The 8th.
Of November.
Of November.
Uh-huh. Landowners and the public deserve a response to you to hold you accountable. Now, these are pretty sharp words among two Democrats. Landowners and the public deserve a response to hold you accountable. Over a year's worth of work and meetings with landowners by my administration culminated in the drafting of this bill. Now, I think you commented on one of those meetings, didn't you, Jose?
comment?
On one of the meetings the governor had with the ancestral landowners about Eagle Field.
Oh, I think this happened right before the hearing for the hospital.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
It was supposed to be a hearing for the hospital.
right, but I think you want to talk about gingering up a rhetoric. I think she had that meeting so that they could go and sit into this meeting and totally throw it off of what its purpose was, and it happened exactly like that.
Yeah. So she to gin up this.
Gin up.
Yeah.
She incited.
Yeah. Okay. I had requested in my transmittal of the bill on October 18 and again on October 24 that you promptly schedule a public hearing. Landowners and the public deserve a response to hold you accountable. Over a year's worth of work and meetings with the landowners by my administration culminated in the drafting of this bill. The least you can do, boy, she's an expert on that, isn't she, is push it over the finish line, the governor wrote. The least Therese could do. Responding to the speaker's comments, the governor stated further to the Post that as a supposed champion of land rights issues, now, this is really sharp talk.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're already elected governor.
Uh-huh.
And you have to talk like this?
Yeah. 2 Democrats, each of whom did very well before the electorate. Therese is obviously even more so than the governor, the most popular Democrat in the party. Yeah. Yeah, she got more votes than the governor. So Terlahi is the supposed champion of land rights issues. She should have been eager to engage the public and also the legislature to provide an opportunity for discussion and debate. The speaker criticized the Land Bank Reform Act as doing nothing for ancestral landowners concerned about lot law or the area of Manila around Eagles Field, where a new medical campus is proposed to be built. The military has also eyed the properties as a potential site for missile defense facilities. Titlahi argued that the Land Bank Reform Act would only end lot law landowners. Of course, they're not landowners. I mean, these guys ought to have their word processors washed out with soap, because they keep perpetrating this myth by the language they use. The folks who would like to get land at Eagle Field are not landowners. The land is owned by the United States government. Terlahi argued that the Land Reform Act would only add lot law landowners to a long list of Tijan and other ancestor landowners who still have not yet been compensated for property returned, yet kept by the government of Guam. Yeah, well, there's nothing that says they got to be compensated. The bill generally suggests that funding will come from different sources. This is again from Terlahi. But an actual appropriation is not included in the bill and will be up to future legislatures to find.
Yeah, that's a point to stand on.
Exactly. Additionally, the fiscal note for this bill indicates that absent an estimate of how many claimants dispossessed ancestral landowners, as well as the appraised value of all of the properties, BBMR is unable to determine the total amount required to deposit it in a land bank. So we're going to pay for it. We don't know how much it's going to cost, but by God, we're going to pay for it. And we have no duty to pay it because the national government already paid for that land twice. However, the most concerning issue about the measure, according to the speaker, is that it seems to set a new policy that lands returned by the federal government will no longer be returned to the ancestral landowners, that these landowners will sign away their rights to land exchange for payment of 1944 prices adjusted for inflation, Tetlahi stated. The bill also proposes that the government condone paying the federal government for leases of ancestral lands. In March 2011, there was a march on Fenna by senators in protest over a similar proposal that Guam lease parts of Fenna back instead of an outright return. The whole framework is a reversal of Guam's decades law of getting lands returned and military's promise in fiscal 2019 for net negative use. We must, as a people, continue to push for justice and return of these lands, Tetlahi added. Now, who do you suppose she means by as a people, Jose?
Those that aren't as dogs. I don't know. Well, we know who.
We know. It's not me.
No.
I don't have any responsibility here at all.
And it's not half of me.
Not half of you. So I can continue my rant here about the national government paid for the land twice, and now you want it back again, and you don't want no reimbursement. It's just a freebie, just a windfall. And because you're not getting it, and because the media has invented all this new vocabulary, you think you have a right to it when you don't. I'm going to continue on with this rant because I have no duty here, according to Speaker Tetlahi. All right, let's break for the big halftime show. Sorry, Facebook is on strike again. We can't do the Lulian Guerrero show. We can't do Rogues Gallery either. Wait till Monday.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Searching for a motive. I'm Richard Jordan, Fox News. Police in Virginia are looking into what caused a Walmart manager to target and kill store employees Tuesday night.
There's been a local report that the gunman had some sort of hit list on him. Police have not confirmed that at this point. I spoke with a Walmart employee who was in the break room when the shooting occurred, and she said that she was absolutely scared for her life, that she knew that this manager had a bad reputation and someone she always believed was just mean, somebody that she tried to avoid as much as possible. Police have identified the gunman as 31-year-old Andre Bing. His job was the overnight team leader. He had worked at Walmart since 2010. Police believe after the rampage he shot and killed himself.
Fox's Mark Meredith in Chesapeake County, Virginia. The Department of Homeland Security is fighting back. A group of Republican lawmakers visited the U.S. southern border and called for the resignation of the agency's leader, Alejandro Mayorkas.
In a statement to Fox, DHS said in part, quote, members of Congress can do better than point the finger at someone else. They should come to the table and work on solutions for our broken system and outdated laws, which have not been overhauled in over 40 years. But some Republicans argue that they have brought forth solutions, including ways to improve the country's asylum process and deportation efforts. Meantime, the El Paso sector alone saw a 280% increase in illegal border crossings last month compared to this time last year.
Fox's Christina Coleman in Los Angeles. The National Retail Federation expects an additional 8 million holiday weekend shoppers this year, but there are fewer choices for early bird shoppers.
Target announced last year it will never open on Thanksgiving again. Rival Walmart also keeping doors closed, as well as Home Depot, Best Buy, Macy's, and even some grocery chains like Trader Joe's, Publix, and Costco.
Fox's Matt Napolitano. America's listening to Fox News.
Farewell ANZ Bank, you've been an excellent corporate citizen for 30 plus years. And yes, we're competitors, but we're sorry to see you go. Now let us address the bank's customers. Bank Pacific's arms are wide open to accept your banking needs, whether it be to handle your savings, commercial checking, merchant business, or consumer or commercial loan needs. We're open on Saturdays in 4 convenient locations and have excellent online banking services. And we're staying, for as you might know, where others put branches, we place roots. Equal opportunity lender, member FDIC.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
A school voucher law in Tennessee is upheld for now.
The law allows what are known as education savings accounts, giving eligible families about $8,000 in public tax money to help pay for private schooling. Opponents argue that can weaken Tennessee's public education system because funding for school districts is tied to the number of students. But a 3-judge panel says counties and families who sued failed to prove immediate harm, noting that a school improvement fund replaces diverted funding for at least 3 years. Tennessee's Republican governor calls the voucher program a life-changing opportunity, noting that hundreds of students have already enrolled. Lisa Brady, Fox News.
The avian flu outbreak in the United States is now the deadliest on record. New data from the Agriculture Department finds more than 50 million birds were lost due to the illness this year. An automaker issuing a big recall.
Ford has a lot of SUVs to fix around the world, recalling 634,000 Broncos Sports and Escapes, model years 2020 through 23. The problem? They could have cracked fuel injectors that can spill fuel or leak vapors onto the engine, sparking fires. Ford has reports that's happened more than 20 times, and in some cases, just minutes after a vehicle was turned off. Ford is not ready yet to fix these SUVs. Repairs aren't available at this point, but owners will be notified starting next month. Ford is also extending warranties to cover cracked fuel injectors for up to 15 years. Dave Anthony, Fox News.
Billionaire investor Warren Buffett donated more than $750 million in Berkshire Hathaway stock to the 4 foundations run by his family. Buffett typically makes large charitable donations each summer. It's the first time the 92-year-old has made a second gift in the same year. I'm Richard Jordan, and this is Fox News.
Christmas is a very special time, but it can also be a very hard time. For the foster children Harvest House serves, it can be difficult and painful being away from their families and siblings. During Harvest House's Christmas celebration event, we hope that siblings living in different foster homes can join together to share in Christmas joy. We need your help to provide all 600 plus foster children with Christmas gifts. Help us make this a memorable Christmas for each of them. Harvest House will be accepting gifts until December 14th. Contact us at 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net if you have questions or want a suggested gift list. That's 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net.
Choice Broadcasting has done it again.
Votes are in and we hit the trifecta.
93.3 The Point, Pika's best radio station.
Kyle Mandapat, Pika's best radio personality.
Daryl Lizama, Pika's best DJ.
The stations of Choice Broadcasting say thanks for all your votes and support.
Congratulations to all of Pika's best nominees.
If you're an advertiser, find out what our best can do for you and your business.
Call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages, and let us get your message out to Pika's best listeners with Pika's best broadcasters.
Okay, so here we are, second half of Tall Tales. And as I mentioned before we started the big halftime show, no Lou Leon Guerrero show today, and no Rogues Gallery because Facebook is still giving us problems. I don't understand how Facebook has been so successful, because it is an inferior product in every front as far as I'm concerned. Whatever that counts for. Okay, this is the last sentence I read then of this story where Lou and the governor and Theresa Terlahi are battling it out. This is Terlahi's quote. "We must, as a people, continue to push for justice and return of these lands." And then that's the end of the quote. Back to the article. The desire for land return has been evident in public policy, such as in the creation of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, which is charged with facilitating the return of ancestral land or granting just compensation to original owners. When ancestral land cannot be returned due to public use, claimants can be compensated through land bank funds. But as far as returning land to ancestral landowners, federal law poses a challenge. Now, I'm going to go back and read that paragraph the way it ought to read if it didn't use the invented vocabulary. The desire for land return, the desire for the conveyance of government land to others is evident in public policy, such as in the creation of the Ancestral Lands Commission, which is charged with facilitating the return, not quite a return, charged with facilitating the conveyance of land condemned by the national government to people who owned the land before it was condemned, or granting just compensation to the pre-condemnation owners. When that land cannot be returned due to public use, pre-condemnation owners can be compensated through land bank funds. That's the way it really should read. If we're not going to, I don't know if they have this at the Daily News, but this should all be printed in orange type, because it's a classic example of systemic racism.
It's the narrative.
It is the narrative. As far as returning land to ancestral landowners, federal law poses a challenge. Public Law 106-504 is intended to place GovGuam ahead of all federal agencies in return of federal accessed lands. It essentially bars the return of land to original owners on Guam, which really should read not return, but the conveyance of that land to pre-condemnation owners. With that roadblock in place for land return, the governor has proposed the Land Bank Reform Act to facilitate monetary compensation. Now, if that were the law, who's going to pay for this? You know who's going to pay for it? Yeah. All the taxpayers at Guam are going to be, it's going to be a gigantic transfer of wealth.
We as a people will be paying for it.
Yeah. Okay, then we go on to the final paragraph in the article. However, some owners and heirs at Eagles Field continue to desire land return and have asked public officials to work on amending the federal law. There's an old saying here, Jose. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You can tell a horse's age by examining his dentition. So if someone is kind enough to give you a horse, don't take the bridle of the horse from the donor and right there in front of the donee, pry the horse's mouth open and say, oh, yeah, okay, this ain't worth much. And, of course, this really doesn't depend on what the pre-condemnation owners want or don't want. And, the way this article reads is kind of like, oh, yeah, We got to call Congress and tell them some of the owners at Eagles Field want their land back. So you got to change that law.
Okay, I know we've gone over this before, or you've gone over this before, but could you explain again when this land was condemned, the landowners, the pre-condemnation landowners, were compensated?
They were as I've read from the Constitution so many times, requires just compensation. So they were paid just compensation at the time.
But not once, but twice.
Okay, and that was when the land was taken. And then in 1978, Delegate Wanpet got a law through Congress that said every one of those people can be paid again.
Okay, so how is there a list of people who claim to be landowners of this place or pre-condemnation landowners if you've already been compensated? It's like if I sold my car to somebody and I got compensation for it, I could no longer claim that car if it gets abandoned on the road.
How about this? You bought a car from Triple J, right? And you drove it for a couple years, and then you sold it, and then Triple J decided there was a recall notice. But rather than recall the car and work on it, if you wanted to, you could opt for cash, right? So you write in, and the cash is $500. You write in and say, I'm an ancestral owner of that car. Send the check to me. Triple J is going to say, no, you don't own that car. The guy that bought it from you owns the car. It's exactly the same thing.
So I'm not understanding the whole. To me, both parties, both the governor and the speaker, are talking a lot of hot air with nothing to support it underneath.
Exactly. And the media is falling right in line because they've adopted the language.
Systemic racism.
It's a classic case of systemic racism.
Is it nobody wants to say anything because they've stuck a word ancestral behind it?
The reason that nobody wants to say anything is here. Just a second here.
What I'm searching for is what is the real grievance with this whole situation?
Oh, here's the reason nobody but me is brassy enough to say anything about it. We must, as a people, continue to push for justice in return of these lands.
There.
Yeah, that's the reason. So what does justice mean here? Provide a windfall for people whose real property was condemned 50, 60, 70 years ago. That's justice, providing this windfall. And if you speak out against providing that windfall, you're not only against the windfall, but guess who? Chamorros in general.
Well, this would be a third windfall then.
Exactly. And for those fortunate folks that did get title to that real property that was condemned, that was the third windfall. The government bought it twice and then gave it back. Such a deal.
Now, this is what the funny part is. The narrative keeps putting this tag ancestral lands and us, the people, denoting Chamorros. But this type of activity from the government has happened all over the United States. So, really, where people get compensated for land that's taken from them.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's military bases or roads from counties and townships.
Yeah.
But you don't hear people calling them ancestral landowners.
No.
Or even pre-compensation landowners.
The condemnation of private property for public use is the norm. It's routine.
I'm surprised people haven't been calling this a racial incident. That the government is only picking on us people.
Because we're Chamorros.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they can just take lands from Chamorros. Because this happens all over the U.S.
It does. I probably told about Walter Scoyne, my hometown. Walter Scoyne had a really nice house on the edge of town, had a swimming pool. There aren't very many swimming pools in southern Wisconsin. Beautiful house. And when it was decided that the highway that is now referred to as I-43 was going to be built, Government came along. Sorry, Walter.
There's a really famous case in Connecticut that happened in New London, and I lived in that area where the government took a whole neighborhood. Oh, people were compensated. There was a case because technically the land was supposed to be used for a shopping center, not really public use in that sense.
Yeah.
But the courts actually upheld the taking of it.
Yeah.
And they did compensate the person who brought it to court, paid her for the money. She protested it. And the lands remained blighted. They never really developed on it, and it remains blighted today.
So,
but you don't see people trying to get more money out of that.
No. I've never. I haven't looked really hard, but I've never heard anybody, kvetching about, okay, now give me my land back, or pay me for it again and again and again. Yeah, this is and the politicians have invented this thing because it's a way to pander people and to make them feel like they really got screwed. They got screwed, and I'm here to help you.
And I know we're saying the most unpopular things right now, Bob, but it's the truth.
It's exactly. The rice is not red. It's orange. No matter how many times the newspaper says it's red, it ain't red. Yeah, so there you go. Well, I have a feeling we haven't heard the last of this yet, but it's interesting to see now the speaker and the governor are fighting over it because the speaker is saying, we're supposed to give them their land back. And governor, now you just want to give them money instead of the land. The answer is, it's kind of like my answer to the Chamorros versus Chukis. Remember that one? The Clinton introduced a bill to allow the Chukis to build their cultural center there, and Chamorros stampeded the legislature saying, why are you giving them land to them when we haven't even gotten our Chamorro land trust that land? My answer to the whole thing is government's got no business doing this, got no business giving away land in the first place. An efficient, effective government operating within the rule of law, providing basic government services on at least a break-even basis. Wouldn't have these problems.
Now, here's my opining analysis of this whole rigmarole.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's talking about the hospital and the lack of transparency on the new hospital and that whole issue and controversy.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Governor.
Yeah. Well, it's like a magician. The magician brings his really good-looking assistant out, right?
The speaker? It feels like she's the assistant.
Yeah, and so all the attention is directed to the speaker while the magician is reaching down, under his chair and grabbing the rabbit and putting it in his hat. Nobody notices, right?
Misdirection.
And that's exactly what's going on here. And according to somebody, that's on post here, that's exactly what the governor did with that meeting, get them all fired up about give the land back to the ancestral landowners before they went to
the oversight hearing on that
hospital.
issue.
Yeah, on the hospital.
On the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln, you can fool all of the people some of the time, some of the people all of the time, but you can't fool tall tales any of the time. We're just going to see, right? You talk about transparency. Some of these politicians are so easy to see right through. Okay, next item on the card, Mike Pompeo versus Randy Weingarten. Mike Pompeo was the Secretary of State during the Trump administration, former member of the House of Representatives, been around a lot of good credentials. And this is a column by Natalia Merkver that ran in the New York Post, the only real newspaper in New York. And this is how it starts. What do you call someone who controls the future of 49.9 million American public school teachers? Is your 49.9 million American public school children. For context, Canada has a total population of 38 million. Would you call that person governor, prime minister, the most dangerous person in the world? I'll bet you Carl's going to take offense on that. That's what former Secretary of Mike Pompeo just called Randy Weingarten, the most dangerous person in the world. Randy is the president of the second largest teachers union in the United States. Until schools closed in 2020, I, like most Americans, had no idea who she was or the significance of the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association in our lives. The teachers' union leaders enjoyed relative anonymity as they pull the strings of America's educational and political establishments just off stage. The pandemic lockdowns pulled back the curtain and exposed us to the harsh truth. Suddenly, as parents found themselves fighting on the front lines to reopen our nation's schools, we were faced with an unfamiliar, and to many of my fellow liberal Democrats, unexpected adversary. While we may have previously believed we shared the same values, that is, Democrats believe they share the same values, those values being commitment to diversity, freedom of choice, and all basic civil liberties, it turned out the fake values the union espoused were not what we thought. Furthermore, they held all the cards while parents were left holding their inconsolable children. As stakeholders in our children's public education, many of us thought we had a seat at the table. We believed all the engagement rhetoric coming from mayors, school chancellors, and even our president that parents mattered, that our public schools were lifting our concerns up and centering our children's needs. During the lockdowns and school shutdowns, we quickly realized our delusion. We did not have a say. We watched in despair when, on her first full day in the White House, First Lady Jill Biden met with AFT Chief Weingarten and NEA head Becky Pringle. She famously told them, "You will always have a seat at the table." You know who didn't? Parents and kids. So you'll understand why Pompeo's comment that Randy is the most dangerous person in the world resonated with me. Now, the author here is a Democrat, a liberal. She believes in inclusion and all the rest of that stuff. Randy and her fellow union leaders are the ones who kept our schools closed, our children masked, and our commodities divided during the darkest times of our lives. They had countless opportunities to lead, to help unite, but they chose to destroy instead. The result? Math test scores decreased by the largest amount ever. Decades were taken off for reading scores. The union, meanwhile, wants fewer tests, less accountability, and an overall lowering of academic standards. Randall says Pompeo is attacking her. Randall says that Mike Pompeo is Randy says Mike Pompeo is attacking her because she's Jewish and gay. The fallbacks, right?
Right.
Yeah. This is just another attempt at gaslighting by using identity politics to obscure the truth. Boy, there's a lot coming from a Democrat. Randy and the teachers' unions have extorted billions of dollars from this country, and instead of using it to keep schools open and help disadvantaged kids, they funneled it into key Democratic races, including Kathy Hochul's, which raised a record $60 million. Now, there have been a lot of reports about how much both AFT and NEA contributed to Democrat politicians. Today, while Randy races around the world trying to save democracies, she leaves in her wake the smoldering flames of an irreversibly wrecked public education system she was entrusted with. The greatest democracy in the world is at risk because of her malfeasance. I would say that's pretty dangerous. So the author here is the co-founder of Restore Childhood, a nonprofit dedicating to ending COVID mandates for children, restoring athletics, art, and academics across the United States. She's producing a documentary on lockdowns, 15 days. So that's it. So a little bit more about the teachers' unions. There are two now, the NEA, the National Education Association, and the American Federation of Teachers. The the Guam Federation of Teachers is a local of the NEA. So a little historical background here. The NEA, National Education Association, was around probably since the turn of the last century. And in the beginning, they were an umbrella group. Teachers, counselors, principals, superintendents, anybody in the education game would be welcomed into the NEA. The AFT, in the beginning, teachers only. The AFT was founded in Chicago, and until sometime in the 60s, it was still located in Chicago. In the 60s, it moved to Washington, because of course that's where all the action is. The AFT, a local of the GFT, a local of the AFT, was chartered here in 1965. I was around at the from the get-go with the GFT. And at that time, the NEA scoffed at the GFT because they said, the members of the NEA said, we are professionals. We are educational professionals, teachers, counselors, principals, superintendents. We are professionals. These guys over here, they're just labor union, kind of like blue collar, they're not in the same league as we are. Well, in what year would it have been? 64, 63, somewhere back in there. The local, Operating Engineers Local 3 had members at what was then called the commercial port. Their business agent was a gentleman named William D.L. Flores, better known as Bill Maher. Bill Maher was also a member of the legislature. Bill Maher introduced a bill that became Public Law 9-240, the Public Employee Management Relations Act, and called PEMRA. PEMRA said that government employees, classified government employees with a couple of exceptions, could organize, petition the government to establish bargaining units, and then petition the Director of Administration to be recognized as the exclusive bargaining agent for the unit that had been established. But one of the kickers in PEMRA was no management. He couldn't have management and take advantage of PEMRA. So the NEA really got the local chapter of the NEA, which I think was called Guam Education Association at the time. They got their skivvies all bunched up and then finally gave in to the inevitable, kicked out all of their administrators, changed their name to Guam Teachers Association, and said, we're going to play this game too. So some rules and regulations had to be drafted in order to implement 9-240. And the statute said that the government officials should consult with identifiable management organizations in the drafting of those rules. So, guess what? I was one of the guys that helped to draft the rules. The NEA, the GTA had one. I think there may be 3 or 4 of us that we finally got it done, but the governor wouldn't promulgate the rules. That was the way the system worked at the time. So the Guam Federation of the Teachers at that time had an attorney on retainer, a gentleman named David Shapiro that old-timers would remember in a heartbeat. David Shapiro represented the GFT, I think perhaps more out of a sense of ideological commitment than any idea of even breaking even, because our monthly retainer was $25. You can't even get a cup of coffee in a law office nowadays for $25. So the GFT sued or brought a petition for writ of mandate against Governor Camacho to promulgate those rules. And the governor's return on the writ was the rules. He promulgated them. So then the next thing was to set an election to determine, a petition was filed to recognize teachers, counselors, and nurses as the bargaining unit. So an election was scheduled to determine who would be the exclusive bargaining agent for that unit. The director of administration decided that there would be 3 blocks on the ballot: GFT, GTA, and neither. Of course, both the GTA and GFT banged the table. You can't do that. That's not in the law. But it stayed there. We had the election. The rules for the election were that in order to be the exclusive bargaining agent, the employee organization had to have a majority of the votes. So we had the election, and the guys in the GFT really worked hard on it. I won't go into the details, but we really worked hard. And when the votes were counted, we had more than the GTA. We had 5 over the necessary majority figure. So we, in effect, won by 5 votes. So the GFT was recognized as the exclusive bargaining agent for teachers. We negotiated a contract in 1970. And the way it works is once a union, it becomes the exclusive bargaining agent, it almost never changes. So from 1970 up until now, 52 years, GFT is still the exclusive bargaining agent for that group. Okay, let's head for Wrigley Field, and I'll come back and wrap this up a little bit.
Choice Broadcasting has done it again.
Votes are in and we hit the trifecta.
93.3 The Point, Pika's best radio station.
Kyle Mandapat, Pika's best radio personality.
Daryl Azama, Pika's best DJ.
The stations of Choice Broadcasting say thanks for all your votes and support.
Congratulations to all of Pika's best nominees.
If you're an advertiser, find out what our best can do for you and your business.
Call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages, and let us get your message out to Pika's best listeners with Pika's best broadcasters.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pika's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
I'm going to finish up here with you in just a minute, but I peeked at Facebook during the seventh inning stretch here at Wrigley Field, and there's a post from Tomas Tenorio Betnatu that I think I need to speak to. And he says, I don't believe all the pre-condemnation landowners received just compensation from the feds. I'll have to double check. Well, I think he knows what he's saying. I know what he's saying. This isn't a matter of belief. This is a matter of facts. And this is what you get from the pre-condemnation landowners. Yeah, they took my parents' land, and you know how much they paid? 9 cents a square meter. That land is worth $100 a square meter now. Well, just compensation means the value of the land at the time of the taking, not 70 years, 50 years later. I'm not aware of any land that the national government now owns having taken it in the process of eminent domain for which just compensation was not paid. Now, if you do a little studying on eminent domain, the national government has the ability just to drive on the land and take it and sort out the particulars later on. It's not how the system actually works, because the way the system works, when a declaration of taking is filed, and that's it. When that one paper is filed, the land goes to the national government. But when it's filed, the feds file an estimated just compensation. And the landowner can withdraw that immediately without prejudice to going to trial and getting a larger amount. But the feds can just drive onto the land and take it. So guess what happened during World War II? You know, when the Marines came ashore, here's how it happened. The Marines came ashore at Assen, right? The first thing they did was right out there on the beach, they built a federal district court, right? And then they brought in a bunch of lawyers, and they filed all of these suits of eminent domain to take like Herman Field, where the airfield was, and Rhodey Point, and Fonte Plateau, and no.
And the Japanese held there and waited for them to finish.
Exactly. It was a timeout, right? In fact, I think they may have even gotten an injunction against the Japanese, no shooting until this is over, right? So, the feds, the Marines and the Army took an awful lot of land, and they put it to use immediately. And it wasn't until after the shooting stopped that the disposition of that land was dealt with. Sometimes the feds just got off it. Sometimes they stayed there, went through the eminent domain proceedings, etc. But as far as I know, none of that land was ever held on to without paying just compensation.
And as far as feelings go, Bob, and I'll discuss it a little bit here, I understand a lot of people think that's unfair and unjust.
Mm-hmm.
I think the greater injustice right now is all these hucksters promising things they can never deliver on.
Absolutely. And that's really part of it, that a lot of people say, I didn't want the money. I didn't want them to take the land. We lived on that land, 3 generations, and my children were looking. It's unfortunate. It's a sad thing. But as we've discussed here, it's not something new. It's not something particular to Guam. And the whole idea behind it is that in order for a society to prosper, there has to be some means for the government to take land from private owners and put it to a public use. I wonder if that's Tomas Betnatu. No, it's R. Carl, the most dangerous man. Here is the only person that I know of that's potentially as dangerous as Randy Weingarten, but for a different reason. Go ahead, R. Carl.
I might have to sue Randy Weingarten. She's going after my title.
Exactly.
That's not very nice.
No.
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Bob. My understanding is that at some point after the island was recaptured from the Japanese, that there began to be a build-up for the planned invasion of Japan, and at one point, Guam basically amounted to the largest military installation.
It was the largest. It was the largest accumulation of military material in the world.
In the world, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, I just wanted to know if that was accurate. So, fortunately, it didn't come down to that, where the Americans and the British and their allies had to invade Japan because the estimates of the deaths that would have resulted range from 1 million people to 1.5 million people. But yeah, I was just curious about that, if what I heard was accurate, and Judge Bob has said it is, so that's pretty much the end of the line there.
That's it. I ruled on that one, Carl.
He has ruled. Well, that's all I wanted to know. I just wanted to satisfy my curiosity.
Okay, always good to talk to you, Carl.
Same.
Yeah, so I guess I've said enough about the whole condemnation process. And you hear, it's sad. Sumai, before the war, was a bustling little town, as was Hagatna. Hagatna had 14,000 people before the actually the Americans are the ones that destroyed it in the reconquest. And Sumai, and people who lived there, we really like Sumai, but the Navy took it away from us, and we had to move. They're all relocated to Santa Rita, and it's unfortunate, but the rules, the law, and the constitutional provisions dealing with eminent domain are not very well equipped to deal with hurt feelings, nor is most of the rest of our legal system. Okay, back to Mike Pompeo versus Randy Weingarten. I was giving a little workup on the history of the American Federation of Teachers here on Guam. So that first contract was negotiated between the Guam Federation of Teachers and the Department of Education. Several more were negotiated, and the union kind of chugged along, and in my eyes, turned from a union that was the primary purpose of which was to support its members to a business union. Started paying the officers pretty good sized full-time staff. In the beginning, we were very idealistic, altruistic people who are willing to work really hard for nothing at all. And I think the culmination of the whole business union thing was when Matt Rector got elected to the legislature, operated his office, his senatorial office out of union headquarters, paid the union rent for that headquarters. Outrageous, but you know what the members of the union did about that?
Nothing.
Not a thing. Relaxed and enjoyed it. So that to me was a real turning point from the union. I would hope that they've come back from the business union approach. I don't know that they have. And it's unfortunate that something that, in my own eyes, started out to be something really good.
Now, is it mandatory that teachers have to be a part of this union?
No.
Okay.
No, there's no closed shop, no union shop. If you're not a member, you don't. If you don't want to be a member, you don't have to be. You don't have to pay an agency fee, etc.
So these dues are what's paying these salaries.
Exactly.
Members, do something.
And another thing about the dues, the GFT being a local of the AFT has to pay what's called per capita to the AFT. So the local union has to send a check periodically to the national per capita dues. And there was a time when the GFT was one of the 10 largest locals in the AFT. And they really paid a lot of attention to us at one time. In fact, in about 1968 or 9, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, a man named Carl Magel, actually came all the way out here to pay a courtesy call on us. And it was a great thing. But once again, I think there was a world of difference between Carl Magel and Randy Weingarten. Okay, so that's so much for Mike Pompeo versus Randy Weingarten. Anybody wants to come in and post on that? Teachers, union members, whatever, I'll be looking for you. And let's see, I've got... I got to go to Churchill Downs while I'm looking for my next item here.
Farewell, ANZ Bank. You've been an excellent corporate citizen for 30 plus years. And yes, we're competitors, but we're sorry to see you go. Now let us address the bank's customers. Bank Pacific's arms are wide open to accept your banking needs, whether it be to handle your savings, commercial checking, merchant business, or consumer or commercial loan needs. We're open on Saturdays in 4 convenient locations and have excellent online banking services. And we're staying, for as you might know, where others put branches, we place roots. Equal opportunity lender, member FDIC.
Christmas is a very special time, but it can also be a very hard time. For the foster children Harvest House serves, it can be difficult and painful being away from their families and siblings. During Harvest House's Christmas celebration event, we hope that siblings living in different foster homes can join together to share in Christmas joy. We need your help to provide all 600 plus foster children with Christmas gifts. Help us make this a memorable Christmas for each of them. Harvest House will be accepting gifts until December 14th. Contact us at 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net if you have questions or want a suggested gift list. That's 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net.
Okay, next item I'm going to cover here is Wokistan versus History. And this is an article by Paul Godfrey in a site called Chronicles Magazine. And this deals with statues and the removal of statues. And once again, you know the wokesters want to tear down every single statue anywhere in the country, except the statue of George Floyd, which must be worshipped. Yeah, I got a couple of callers trying to get in here. Let me hang on to the wokesters here for a second, see if I can accommodate these callers. I got Johnny Utah and another Joe. Johnny Utah wants to talk about military and land ownership stateside. Another Joe wants to talk about Doug Moylan. Go ahead, Johnny Utah.
Yeah, hey, Judge Bob. How you doing? Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
And I hope you guys had a blessed Thanksgiving. One of the things that I know from when I was there on Guam was, and it was that emotional response, a lot of people seem to have a lot of animosity towards the amount of land that the military has possession of, on Guam. And, they'll say, hey, they own, the military owns a third of the island. We don't even have a third of our property, or our land doesn't belong to us. But what I don't think a lot of people that live on Guam or have never lived off of Guam or in the mainland realizes a lot of the states are in the same boat. Namely Utah. A third of our land in the state of Utah is Dugway Proving Ground. It's an Army base. It's thousands and thousands of square miles. The entire western half of the state is an Army base. I think it's called the Dugway. Have you heard of that? The Dugway.
Yeah, I have. And also, Nevada, over 90% of Nevada is owned by the national government. Yeah.
Yeah, and Arizona, I think theirs is at least a fifth or maybe a fourth of the state of Arizona is another Brooks Air Force bombing range and the Yuma Army Proving Ground. That's almost the entire southwest portion of the state. And not to mention, get into California, and it's just there's a lot of gross misunderstanding of how things work with the United States government and the states and the rights of the states and the people in the states. And because Guam is a state, I mean, I know it's not an actual state, but it's a territory. But it acts as a state in a way, in an analogy. I know, the hardliners are going to go, oh, no, we're not a state. Yeah, I know that, but you do function in a sense like a state. You actually have in some ways you guys got a better situation than states have. And if you look at the comparison, with where you're at with comparison to China and what's going on in the world today, I would be happy that the military is there building up and making a stand and increasing its strength. I understand the Space Force is there. They've established their first command on Guam. So Guam's Guam is becoming popular with the military. But I just wanted to make that point. That Guam's not alone in having over a third of their property be owned by the military.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you chimed in with that. That's an important point. Thank you very much, Johnny Utah.
Yes, sir.
And then I've got another Joe who wants to talk about, let's see, what was it again? AG-elect Doug Moylan lifting of the injunction of the anti-abort law. Go ahead, another Joe.
Hey, Bob, I wonder if Doug Moylan is going to follow through and dissolve the injunction on Public Law 20-134. And I wonder if it's going to be a challenge to that by the 37th Guam legislature. How many of the new and current Democrat senators would find a way? Is there a way that they could oppose Doug Moylan from dissolving that injunction?
Well, what he would have to do would be file a motion with the district court to dissolve the permanent injunction prohibiting the enforcement of Bell's law. No senator, as a senator, would have standing to enter into that litigation, nor would the legislature as a body. So if the legislature wants to do anything, the only thing they can do is pass or repeal laws. So if they really are that fired up about it, what they could do is repeal Bell's law and enact a law more to their liking. They're not going to do that. They're even afraid of the heartbeat bill.
So they wouldn't touch it at all.
They couldn't.
With not even Doug Moylan's 10-foot pole, whether for or against it.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob. I'll just keep listening. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thanks for another Joe. Yeah. So. Yeah, you'd think that the pro-abortion folks would have, as soon as Dobbs came down, would have had a one-liner. Public Law 20134 is repealed. End of story. But they didn't, because they're afraid of it. Because they're afraid.
You give them so much credit for even knowing about this.
Of course.
You're too generous, Bob.
About knowing about anything.
About anything, especially that law.
You're absolutely right. My bad, Jose. I take it back.
Okay, it is humorous.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I got about 3 minutes to go here. I'm just going to start this article about wokesters versus history. And when it's time to say good, can I say goodbye to? Yes, I can. Huh? The impending removal of Moses Ezekiel's magnificent monument from Arlington National Cemetery follows well laid out guidelines for obliterating the non-woke past everywhere in the culturally revolutionized West. In the United States, we've seen statues of once honored historical figures repeatedly vandalized and torn down by social justice goons as police, under orders from superiors, are forced to turn a blind eye. Universities have not only allowed such criminality to go unchecked, but have taken additional steps to justify these Taliban-like excesses by renaming university colleges and buildings to remove politically incorrect associations. The great Southern Senator John C. Calhoun has not only had his name removed from a college at Yale, but has seen the same dishonor befall him posthumously at Clemson in South Carolina. This university is now denied any official recognition to the political giant on whose estate, the Fort Hill Plantation, the school now stands. At Princeton, a similar fate has befallen another Southerner, Woodrow Wilson, who has been canceled by the university of which he was once a president. And he was a progressive. Okay, let's wrap it up for today by saying goodbye to our president. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The shopping season starts now. I'm Richard Jordan, Fox News. More holiday shoppers are expected this year despite the rise in inflation.
We've heard stories about consumers maybe planning to shop a little bit differently this year because of inflation. Maybe they trade down, buy some less expensive gifts. But overall, the National Retail Federation is expecting an increase in terms of the number of shoppers from last year. Their number is 166 million. That would be a big number. And that's the estimate in terms of total number of shoppers from Thanksgiving through Monday. If that's what it is, it'd be up 8 million from last year. More than 2/3 of those surveyed said they plan to shop in some way this weekend.
Fox Business Network's Connell McShane. President Biden focused on gun control while on vacation.
President Biden spent part of Thanksgiving here in Nantucket venturing into town for the first time, where it was guns on his mind after a spate of mass shootings.
The idea we still allow semi-automatic weapons to be purchased is sick. It's just sick. It has no social redeeming value. Zero, none. Not a single solitary rationale for it.
Biden and the First Lady also called deployed U.S. military units, including the Army's 10th Special Forces Group in Europe.
Fox's Lucas Tomlinson in Nantucket, Massachusetts. Police in Moscow, Idaho asked for patience as investigators continue to look for the people who murdered 4 college students.
It appears as if the investigation is done at the crime scene. Police are keeping most of what they know close to the vest. They don't want to tip off the killer as to what they know. Police are also looking into whether there may be a connection to a similar fatal knife attack last year in Salem, Oregon, about 400 miles away from here.
Fox's Dan Springer. Police say details released to the public are limited to protect the integrity of the investigation. America's listening to Fox News.
Get all of your
favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Kane, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for all the details. The Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day.